Hello Texas from India, Mumbai. Welcome to my training Offensive Embedded Exploitation, getting your hands dirty with embedded and IoT security testing. So get started with agenda. So agenda for this talk is, first we will have an introduction, then we will set up our machine, then we will see how to perform a reconnaissance for embedded and IoT devices, then we will move towards showtime like firmware analysis, and then getting hands dirty, that is dynamic testing, and lastly we will touch base our fuzzing, reverse engineering and exploit development section. Okay, so get started. Let me introduce myself. Kaustup Padwad, also known as Security Beast. I am a product security researcher. I love embedded and IoT device security testing. I have a dozens of CVEs. Dozens is almost 2 dozens of CVEs. That is around 24 CVEs in embedded system. And I like to share my knowledge. So I spoke at multiple conferences. Okay, now let's get introduced with IoT. IoT in action. So many industries started using IoT in a wide manner. IoT is taking over the world. So like every industries are using IoT, humans are using IoT, even animals are using IoTs. So let's see, I have classified this, I taken source from somewhere. So let's see IoT in action. Manufacturing industry started using IoT, government also using IoT, mobility and Wi-Fi is the key element for IoT security testing. And smart digital citizens, that is us, that we are using IoT. I'll tell you how. Then health is the key component for IoT security testing. And agriculture industry, smart building, smart transport, these all industries are using IoT. So let's see how they are using. So manufacturing industries want to improve the product quality and want to less the errors in product, and in timely manner they want delivery. So for all these sections they are using IoTs. So just one test case for manufacturing industries. Let's say there is an ice cream vendor who manufactures liters and liters of ice cream, and they stores that complete ice cream in a warehouse where there are chiller kind of freezers are there, where they stores their manufactured ice cream. So one small case here is they brought one small IoT device which takes input from electricity and temperature and power supply, that is electricity, temperature monitor, and this inputs it take, and it will notify if power cut is happened or temperature is increased for that storehouse. So warehouse having thousands and thousands of freezers, and if one chiller or one freeze got disconnected from electricity supply or somehow it malfunctioning and it's not working, so it becomes a tedious task for warehouse managers to monitor each and every fridge. So this small dongle takes input, it sees temperature is correct, okay, temperature is increased, it will create an alert sent to IoT platform, and that IoT platform will instantly send a message to the warehouse owner. That warehouse owner will come to know that okay, dongle number XYZ, it is mounted at this location, this fridge is not working. So he can immediately send someone and take action and save the complete ice cream from getting waste. So this is one just a small example. In many things they are using such kind of stuff. Now government, we all have a street light in city, those are continuously on. So one company, Quictel, have demonstrated their a narrowband IoT based dongle. So what it takes, it will sense if someone is passing through the road, and if someone is passing then only it will turn on the light, and rest of the time street light will be off. So that saves lots and lots of electricity. Like not all streets are always busy. Some streets are occasionally someone is passing, but lights are still on. So like keeping all hundreds and thousands of light turned on for no reason make no sense, right? So it says that if some vehicle is passing, then it will only turn on the light. So this is how government can make our city smarter by implementing IoT stuff. Mobility and Wi-Fi is a key stuff because one interface called narrowband IoT interface, it is provided by mobile telecommunication provider, mobile ISPs. Smart digital citizens, we have smart wears, smart watch, we have smart glass, we have everything becomes smart. Like we almost everyone have fancy gadgets like smart TV we use, smart fridge we use, and I don't know whether smart washing machine is also present in your might be present at someone's place. Smart door locker we are using. So we citizens are becoming smarter, and we started using these smart things. Then health. The one commanding example for health IoT is I read about somewhere I read about IoT ambulance. So sometimes hospital may be in sufficient distance, so where it takes time to reach a patient, and sometimes patient might need a immediate treatment. So what this ambulance does, when the patient enters inside the ambulance, some sensors get planted on his body, and those sensors immediately present a health status to the doctor, assigned doctor, and immediately doctor can start treating the patient. So based on his heartbeat, based on his blood pressure, based on the body condition, doctors can start treating them. So health plays major role in IoT. So like medical devices is like a most key component in IoT security testing. So smart agriculture are like here in some areas there is a electricity cuts due to power shortage, or sometimes we call it load shedding. So what happened is like sometimes power came at night, and at that time farmer have to run there. So we can do a smart farming. So one sensor can be created which will sense the dryness of the soil, which sense the environment, what is the current temperature, and based on it will turn on the water pump. So if the soil is dry, it will automatically turn on and it will give a certain water level to the farm. So this is how smart farming can be done. Smart buildings, I have excellent example in next slide. Power grid is becoming smart, so like no electricity guy need to come at your place and take the readings and how much electricity you have utilized. So basically they implement some smart sensors, it will automatically send the reading to the electricity provider. And for smart transport, we have a Tesla, excellent example, complete automated car. So these are the IIoT, industrial IoT, and this IoT stuff industries are using, we are using, everyone is using. Now there is something called inhuman IoT. So those parts will sit inside the body. For example, you can see here, it's a insulin pump, it's a pacemaker, where cardiac pacemakers here, then this collar implants, then gastric simulators, then first drop implants, foot drop implants. So many things are there which resides inside our body. So with the smart with the pacemakers, you can set the heartbeat. Not much into medical stuff. And with insulin pump, let's say you have a child diabetic patient who can't take a insulin shots on time, so you can remotely give her insulin shots on time with specific time. So this is inhuman, inside our body IoT stuff we can see in the market. Apart from this, IoT for others, like one company is developing a smart belt. So like everyone loves their pet, so you just tie that belt to their neck, and that belt will start analyzing your pet. Let's say if he got a fever, then he will immediately notify you that his body temperature is high. Based on their behavioral patterns, it will generate sun alert, like if pet is not well, if he is feeling lost, like those kind of activities. So related to animal treatments, it will generate an alert and send it to you. So this is how IoT is everywhere, like inside body, outside body, in industries, and for everyone. So IoT is used everywhere. So let's take a look at example. Those who is wearing headphones, request you to lower down the volume.
精灵，关闭窗帘。
正在关闭窗帘。
天猫精灵，打开电视。天猫精灵，
主人，你说。
我需要一瓶水。
好的，服务员会尽快送来饮用水。机器人正在执行配送任务中，进入电梯。
The self-check-in machine, like the guest mobile check-in, like the robot service and Timogenes voice butler. The purpose of this kind of service and technology is to improve the efficiency of the service and the consistency of the service quality.
您可以取出物品了。
I would definitely like to go a visit and check in this hotel. Okay, so like as he said that it improves the service quality as well as maintain the persistency in the service with the help of technology, because there is a zero human error. Okay, now let's with great power, great responsibilities do come. Let's have a look at some IoT hot news. Have you heard about a witchcraft? Like those black magic guys use a switch to kill someone. No, my grandparents used to tell us the stories, but I don't know whether it's possible or not. But yes, with definitely IoT can do it. Here you can see the first hot news: medicine pumps and pacemaker threat as a doctor simulated hacked overdose. So like insulin pumps, I fired 100 ml shot in your body. It's gonna take a long, but if I can control a pacemaker, if I set a heartbeat to 500, no one can save you, right? This become a critical aspect. So this kind of devices should be get tested thoroughly by world security leaders or world security experts. So hackers break into smart home, play inappropriate music and communicate with a resident via camera. You buy a product for surveillance. Now product become a hacker's spy gadget for you. Isn't it critical? Definitely. Mirai based botnet turns IoT devices into proxy server. So like here the devices means millions of devices. It becomes a literally army of devices. It can attack on anything. I always feel like somebody is listening to me. So you buy, again same story. You buy a camera for surveillance and it becomes a spying. That camera is listening to all the conversation and it is sending to the server, malicious server. No privacy at all. No comments on this moment. And lastly again, FDA recalls nearly 500,000 pacemaker over hacking fears. Super critical issues. So this is how IoT works. And this is how IoT security testing and embedded devices testing is super critical. Before we start, this video is these opinions and this video are completely owned by me, and this video is purely for educational purpose. Disclaimer. So my study for this talk is how can this decent looking IP phone changes into a botnet. You might be wondering why you are targeting an IP phone. The reason behind this is every large corporate have almost 10,000 to 20,000 IP phone based on their employees. Let's say an organization having 20,000 IP phones. That means if you are able, generally these all IP phones are become from they use from one vendor or one brand only. So if you are able to compromise one IP phone, then you are able to compromise 10,000 IP phone or 20,000 IP phone or 50,000 IP phone. Now, one organization having 50,000 IP phone in one city, you target 5 organizations of same kind. So you have 25,000. 2.5 lakhs IP phone. So like similarly, if you target a country, it becomes millions of IP phone. Especially like a business like KPO, BPO, they have IP phones only. Their business is based on that. So if you are able to target one IP phone with one 0-day or 1-day exploit, which can be a RCE, so you can create a millions and billions and trillions of IP phones army. Basically, these devices are running a Linux only in backend. So let's see how can we achieve this. So, and if that millions and trillions of IP phone will attack on one server, it will be a nightmare. It will be a nightmare like for anyone, like Facebook, Google, Twitter, any big service provider websites can be down with this. Don't you think it's a super critical issue? So this is how, so let's see how can we do it. So before we start with this, we have to, what we have to do? We have to get our stuff ready, like we have to get our machine ready. For getting started, generally I heard from many people that I want to start with IoT and security testing, but I don't have budgets to, I don't have budget to buy expensive products. So when I heard about this, like what expensive products? So what do you need before we start, right? For pen testing web application, all you need is one burp suite and one browser. That will be sufficient for a average pen tester. And Python is always there. Okay, so similar way, what hardware we do need actually, and what softwares do we need? That phase we are calling as a preparing the arsenal. So we are setting up our machine in this talk. So I have categorized this in two ways. One is basic setup, another one is advanced setup. So let's see what we need for a basic setup. This all as you can see, only these things we needed. First thing we need is the Linux. So why Linux? Someone might get offended that I use Windows, but why we need a Linux here? We need a Linux because of QEMU. QEMU runs smoothly on Linux, and with QEMU you can emulate all possible embedded architectures on your CPU. Let's say ARM architecture, let's say MIPS architecture. Generally these devices are based on either MIPS or ARM. So like you will rarely see Atom kind of processor in embedded system. Generally this kind of ARM and MIPS rules the world. Okay, and some like Cortex, MediaTek processor, Qualcomm Snapdragon processor, but basically architecture remains the same. It works on RISC mechanism, not a CISC mechanism. So Linux provides a smooth integration with QEMU, and it helps a lot for emulating your binaries. Okay. Secondly, provides a lowest level access to the operating system. So like if you connect one random device to Windows without driver, it will remain an unknown device till you identify the driver for it. But similar way, if you connect one other device to the same device to the Linux, in dmessage it will at least show you the device type, device ID, and the manufacturer for device, and some more additional information in dmessages only. So Linux provides the lowest level operating system, good for fuzzing, and reverse engineering also can be good at Linux, and you can write a Python script, multiple Python scripts you can write, and huge community support is available. So like if you connect anything to Linux, it will give you at least something about that product. So that's why we need a Linux. I generally prefer a Debian. I use Kali Linux with a i3 Windows manager. Okay, you can see here a JTAG. You are not an electronic guy, we are a security professionals. Why we need a JTAG? Because JTAG is the de facto standards for embedded system testing. A product security test, not product security, a product testing. Some devices might not have any way to interact with the device, but definitely you will find a JTAG there. So like some might not have a USB port, UART port, or LAN port or WAN port, nothing to interact, but you will definitely see a JTAG interface there. Sometimes it might not be pinned, it just the points are there, you have to solder the points and you can communicate with it. And when it comes to IoT, it comes to wireless. So like everybody want to go wireless with IoT. So that's why to intercept those requests, we need a API modem. So like to sniff for Zigbee, Z-Wave, this kind of stuff, you need a API modem hardware. And connectors. Seriously, your life is hell without these connectors. We need at least one LAN card, one WAN card, one Bluetooth interface, and screwdriver set, and the Shkira. This device is called Shkira, which allows you to connect your JTAG, your UART, your GPIO, your SPI. This is all in one. Order at least 2 for you, because one might get shorted, so you don't have to be dependent for next shipping. And when it comes to radio frequency, our Great Scott Gadget HackRF is the best. So we need a HackRF. So this is all you need for basic setup from hardware perspective. And definitely this won't cost you more than $1,000 or $1,500. So to get started, all you can purchase this within $1,500 and you can start your IoT security testing. And let's take a look at advanced setup. This lab makes me speechless. I took this from Black Hat slides. So there is no limit for advanced setup. You can grow up up to whatever you want. Okay. Now we have a hardware. Now what softwares do we need? Do we need to purchase some more software? Do we need to spend more on it? No. So here is the weapons which I have shortlisted. First, most important and necessary tool is Binwalk. It is developed and designed by Craig Hefner. It's a all-in-one file system opener, we can say. It have a support for CramFS, SourceQuashFS, then UBFS. You name a file system and Binwalk can extract it. So Binwalk is the most important tool developed by DevTTYS Craig Hefner. Second, we need a Firmadyne. Firmadyne sets up smooth virtualization environment and firmware virtualization, and it also make all dependencies smoother for QEMU. Third, our loved ones Burp Suite for intercepting proxy requests, and Python for automating all your stuff which you have to do on repeatedly. And lastly, the most important tool of IoT testing, that is IDA Pro. So IDA Pro plays the huge role in embedded device security testing, because the without reverse engineering, many things cannot be done. Like you cannot identify a hidden backdoors inside the device. You cannot identify critical vulnerabilities like shell command injection kind of stuff. So this generally you get a binaries. Some binaries are super closed source and some binaries don't have main. So it's like proprietary binary and you don't know where to start. So we have to understand those binaries used by reverse engineering. Okay. And for that, IDA is the best friend. Also, if you can't buy a IDA Pro, you can go with a NSX Hydra and our favorite ones, Radar A2. So any reverse engineering tool you can use. Also, some devices might have a Java running, so you can use a JDGUI for reversing, or you can use a JADX. So basically a reverse engineering tool, all we want is. Okay. So once you have set up with this, the most important phase comes, that is recognition. In this phase, what we have to do is we have to identify our device, what our device is, what are the information that device will give us, and way to interact with the device. So that is all we have to find out. When I got this device for testing, I was just simply wondering what I have to test in this. It's like a IP phone. I connect a LAN card, will make a call, and that's all. But it wasn't like that. It's a deep sea inside it. What we see is just calling. So first thing we have to find is to understand your device. To understand your device, we have to identify the architecture. Get started from the bottomest of the device. What CPU it is using? Is it a MIPS or is it a ARM? What is the architecture of it? Like it's a MIPS big ADN or little ADN. If ARM is thumb mode or normal mode. Then what is the underlying operating system on the devices? Like this we see, all we see is just a one application which is running on the operating system. Similar like a web server, and similar like we use a computer. So similarly it's a mini computer. So first we have to identify what operating system it is running. So sometimes it might be a Linux, majorly it's a Linux, 99%. Some might be a MCUs which is hard coded with a code. Some might running with Android. Nowadays devices are coming with a huge Android support, like a smart TV is complete Android. Then some car products are Android. Either it has some components from Android and some from Linux. sometimes it's just a pure Android, and sometimes it's just a pure Linux. So we have to identify which operating system it is running, which flavors of operating system it is running. Then, so you have identified the architecture, you have identified the operating system. What next? So next is something like ways to interact with a device. Am I missing something? No. Like you have to identify which. Generally, BusyBox helps us a lot in this. BusyBox provides initRD and kernel for this. You have to identify which kernel it is running, because it is important to escalate a privilege after having a limited access on the shell. You might be needing need to know what kernel it uses, and yeah. So this is from the architecture and device point of view. Second, you have to identify the ways to interact with the device. Does this device support a LAN communication? So you can connect a LAN card and take a console or shell of it. Does this device support a UART communication? It have a GPIO communication. Some IoT specific interfaces, like does it talks over NB-IoT only, or it supports normal telecommunication also? It supports SIM communication, and it have a serial interface, and means what max it can have. Like one device was there which I have tested. It have only way to interact is a USB stick. You will not believe, but sometimes it worked. Like there were very limited commands were there on commands were getting executed. It was a complete closed source operating system, and you have to create one file inside the USB drive. You have to connect it. It will detect a USB drive. It will run that file, and based on that file, it will give you a system information. Let's say if you create a file hash exclamation slash like ps-aux, for example, then you connect that USB stick. It will write the output of that ps-aux in text file in same USB stick. If you put a firmware upgrade, you connect the device and it will automatically start upgrading. So similarly, our set-top box, what we have, a cable set-top box, non IP based set-top box, generally these kind of devices communicates over USB only. Some devices works with a SD card, similar way. So means you have to gather as much as possible information from this. You can you see that CE here? This CE. So this is a FCC ID. To know a product complete details, you can check a FCC ID of that product. So there is one number written on it. You can visit FCC ID website, and there you type that number. It will give you all possible information, like its internal, its external, what modules it have, whether it supports a Bluetooth, whether it supports a Wi-Fi, whether it supports BLE communication. This kind of stuff is also available sometimes on FCC ID. So first thing is to know your device, and next step is documentation. You should be always like this. I want more. Give me all possible documentation, like product sheet of the document, data sheet of the document, your QA report of the document, case study document, why this device is in use, and manuals of the document. So as here you can see this device from the device data sheet. I have taken snippet of the protocols. Sorry. Here we can see this device supports SIP version 2 only, and RTP, then SDUN protocol, SDP protocol, SNMP version 2 protocol, TR069, TR101, TR98, and TR111 protocol. So from this document only, some guys might be able to find out the vulnerability. Like, since this device doesn't support SIP, TLS and SRTP communication, if your boss is talking to his boss regarding your appraisal, you can just sit inside the EPBX and IPBX, snip those packets, and you can listen what he talk about you. So this kind of MITM attack you can perform. Okay, and user manual. Unless you provide me your user manual, I will not start the testing. This user manual tells many things, like this device supports a firmware upgrade, it have a web management interface, it have password management, local and remote syslog, auto provisioning, it supports HTTP, TFTP and HTTPS protocol. This IP phone, our IP phone only. Okay, SNTP time synchronization and multi-user level. So this device have multiple users. like admin, support, tech, debug, engineer. This kind of users generally you find in a embedded device for logging in using Telnet, SSH or ISFTP. And I heard you like algorithms, so I use an algorithm to pick an algorithm to generate an algorithm. So you're thinking, what is the role of algorithm here? Okay, so let's say a typical router having a Wi-Fi, and that Wi-Fi having a password. So how you think that password is getting generated? Someone is generating a password from backend and writing it and maintaining it? No. These passwords are generated using algorithm. So if you have hardened the device, if device is 100% secure, but if the password is weak for Wi-Fi, if the algorithm to generate a password is weak for Wi-Fi, then what? There is no use of product security testing, right? If it is calculating MD5 sum of the MAC address as a password, will it make sense? Or first 5 digit of MD5 sum of the MAC address, if they are using as a password, is it safe? No. Once you reverse the algorithm for generating password, you can simply sniff any MAC address nearby you, and you can calculate and you can generate your own password. And most of the cases, people don't bothering changing these passwords a lot. Sometimes they may. And a magic number everywhere. So magic number presents in all devices. So what do you think this magic number is? What do you think about this magic number? So magic numbers are some kind of secret codes. So like we use the *#06# to print a IMEI on phone. So this is a magic number, not this. So device have a functionality which it works for a consumer. But if device is not working, you took device to the service center, and what magic they do, and they get your device started without a hardware repair. They enter in special mode of device, that is called a debug mode or engineer mode, and that can be enabled via entering some magic key. For mobile, some people calls it a boot key, some calls it a secret number, some calls it a engineer password. So engineer password is a part of magic key. So like if you access your device and let's say you type something /engineer, it might ask for a password. /debugger, it might ask for a debugger password. You have to enter that magic password, and then will only it works. Some devices might be showing ADB offline or ADB unauthorized. To get this ADB authorized, you have to enter a ADB password. For accessing all these modes, there are specific passwords, and to enable this mode also there are specific passwords. So those things are called a magic number. So you have to ensure that magic number generation algorithm should be secured. So like long back in 2006, there was a like 2G was booming and 3G was just coming to India in 2004 to 2006. So they some local ISPs like telecom companies started selling their own modem. So those modems was locked to one particular ISP only. So if someone is offering internet at lower cost, they were not allowing you to use that SIM card in their dongle, USB dongle. So what I did, I studied that device a lot, and I found that there is a way to unlock this device using magic number. And those magic number was calculated based on 3 parts, like IMEI of device, serial number of device, and MAC address of device. So if you enter these 3 in particular sequence and run an algorithm, it was generating a password string to unlock the device. I unlocked the device, I reconfigured it with my I removed those restrictions in device, and I put other SIM cards, and it started working. So this is how we can do a stuff in using magic number. This is how we can encode, decode the magic numbers. So magic number is required, and whenever you are performing a let's say you found a way to interact with device, that is a WAN or LAN, and whenever you are interacting with the device, let's say if it's a LAN, you should perform a full port scan in device security testing, and not 1000 ports, not gonna have standard 1000 ports. So here is a snippet form 1 assessment. I found a port 1380, 4046, 23255 and 41565. So these are totally random ports. So here I found a command injection. It was a remote because this port was listening on all interfaces. Here I found a remote denial of service attack. I think I have blogged about this also. Here I found 23255 port remote crash, remotely denial of service attack, and here I found some kind of code injection, code execution vulnerability. This port was opening randomly, so it was between 41,000 to 42,000. So it was picking a random port after boot. Okay, so always perform a full port scan on the embedded devices if it's a network communication. Okay, hope we are in sync till now. All good? Okay, so let's move towards next phase of the assessment. So generally, when we perform a web application security testing, black box or gray box, okay, so we have to spend a lot of time on content discovery, and after content discovery, further time for a content analysis to identify vulnerabilities, and lastly finding appropriate content, like content discovery only. Here we have a privilege to get all the content in front of us and all the direct codes or compiled binary in front of us. How? Firmware. Every device have its own software. That software is generally termed as a firmware. What that firmware is? Firmware is a file which contains a kernel, root file system, and it's the next slide, and bootloader sometimes inside the firmware. So agenda for this section is what is firmware, how to obtain the firmware, how to unpack the firmware, and finding vulnerabilities inside the firmware. Okay, so what is firmware? Firmware is nothing but a file system, kernel, and bootloader. So a complete root FS generally resides inside the firmware. So firmwares are of two types. One is full firmware, another is a delta firmware. Let's say you are using one phone, one high-end phone. Its own operating system consumes 3 GB of the storage. Let's say 64 GB phone or 128 GB phone, you might be able to use only 124 in most of the cases. 4 GB used by operating system used by phone's operating system only, right? So now there is a vulnerability. Let's say recent vulnerability is PPPD, means PPPD binary has been identified for a critical buffer overflow. Now let's say a manufacturer of that phone want to send a patch for this PPPD binary on your device over the air, like it's called a FOTA system. So firmware over the air, some called it over the air updates. So how you think they are going to deliver you? Are they going to send a complete file system? No, that's gonna create a huge load, and it's gonna take a lot for upgrading a phone, right? So what they do, they create a delta package, they send it to the OTA software or whatever the Redband, FTA, CS, many softwares are there, and using that they send that particular package to your phone. So it gets downloaded in MBs and it gets extracted. Some devices is having only a 8 GB memory, 8 GB a lot, 128 MB memory in embedded device. 120 MB is also a lot for embedded system sometimes. Okay, so this is how they for this they create a delta firmware and send it to you. Okay, now how can you obtain this firmware? One, some vendors provide a direct download on their website. You can visit their website and directly download, like D-Link provides, like Netgear provides, many router companies provides a direct download. Second, obtaining from update. Whenever your phone says the new update is available, before downloading that update, set up a MITM communication, man in the middle, set up proxy, click on download. Firmware will get downloaded. You can get that download from Wireshark packages. Okay, extracting from device. So some device might have a UART running. So you are with the username password, or sometimes without username password also present. So you can extract from that device only. And Google Docs is your best friend. You can always type index of or something. And lastly, analyzing traffic. So this is something a crucial task. This is something become crucial. So how it becomes crucial? Sometimes one fine night you have charged your phone and you slept, and next day morning your phone is showing the pop-up that phone is restarted. Might be happen with all of you guys. So how you think this happened? Why your phone got restarted if it is having a battery full charge? Most of the vendors provides a silent upgrade. So that silent upgrade will trigger at a night. So at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. when WhatsApp backup happens, at that time they send a firmware upgrade. It will patch your device, it will upgrade your device without user consent sometimes, and it is called silent photo only, like without user consent. It's a necessary patches, and it reboots your device most of the time, because of if the critical update is there, it needs a reboot. So you should set up like at my home I have set up one proxy server. All traffic from device to my router goes through via proxy server, and I get all the update there only. So like my TV upgrade, my mobile upgrade, my laptop is okay, like I can get it anytime. Like every smart upgrade I generally capture using proxy server. Now you got a firmware, now what? Say just like a monkey testing, type binwalk-e and get extracted and expect for the file system, right? No, that is the most inappropriate approach. So once you get the firmware, what should you do? You should run binwalk. You should first identify whether the firmware is encrypted or compressed. If it's a compressed, you can extract it, okay, but if it's a encrypted, no luck, you cannot extract it. So the first way to start with analyzing is the firmware is encrypted or compressed. So if the when you type a binwalk-e and firmware, you can see some such kind of graph. When the entropy reaches 1, that means firmware is secured and firmware is encrypted with some kind of encryption. If not, then you might see this kind of drops here. You can see this portion is not encrypted. So if the firmware is encrypted, then what? You should give up? No. You should take a hex dump of it, see what are the characters are there. Once I found a password to decrypt the firmware inside the firmware headers. Okay. Once I found a private key to encrypt to decrypt the firmware inside the firmware only. Okay. So you can extract those bytes with a DD. And also you can perform a signature analysis. So you will come to know that whether it's a UBFS, it's a CRAMFS or SquashFS, what is the running. SquashFS you generally found when you extract the firmware. Okay. And once you and if the firmware is compressed, then you can simply extract it with binwalk-e. You should always ask for a decrypted firmware while starting a testing. But in black box approach, there is very least likely chances of getting decrypted firmware. So you can see like if you have a debug over device, or if you find one command injection vulnerability, you can extract the private key to decrypt the firmware from the device and you can decrypt the firmware. So this kind of tricks you can perform. Okay. So yes, some firmwares needs a password. So the updater binary, you should take a look at firmware upgrade binary, and that binary will tell you something like, oh, this is here. And now you extracted a firmware. Now what? You should take a walk on it. Firmwalker. A firmwalker is a tool by Craig Smith, our car hacking village guy. So he wrote a nice script. It automates the firmware analysis. So what you should look inside the firmware? Obviously, first passwd, shadow file for getting the credentials of the device. Second, you should check for the document root. What document root it have? What are the web files that you can access from the document root? Third, binaries. So binaries are like for all the Linux specific binaries and tools, they use a busybox. 99% you will find a busybox. So just grep-v busybox and rest all binaries are yours. You have to perform analysis on this. And libraries. So might be like they generally you see libcurl is using, libopenssl is using, libexpert is using, libuclipc is using. So these libraries are standard and these libraries are available on the internet. So you can check the vulnerabilities related to those libraries on CV or Mitre or anywhere. Okay, but what if some libraries are proprietaries? Those are designs for the specific application which device runs. So you have to take those libraries, and you have to perform a vulnerability research for it, like by reversing, obviously by reversing. And why application binary is needed? Because like in our environment there is a web server and there is an application server, there is a middleware, everything. But in that small devices, how can you host everything? No, right? So this have a web server like Boa web server, Go Ahead web server, and the application logic sits inside the web server only. So you can extract that logic and you can study about that logic and find the vulnerabilities in that pages. So like some ASP files you might be seeing there, so on Go Ahead or Boa server, and those servers you can check. Okay, then all CFG files configuration, all shell script, all certificates, PKI certificates, you can check for this. Email addresses are also there, so like you can identify the employees of the organizations too. Okay, so these are the typical vulnerabilities what we find. So what web server device run, you can get the password. Sometimes there is a firmware inside the firmware, like firmware for the core device, and for Wi-Fi there is a firmware, so you can find the vulnerability inside that firmware too. So firmware is inside the firmware. Then you can definitely get the logic of device getting upgraded, as I talked in previous. Okay, also you can see all the URLs hard coded inside the firmware, so you can see whether your device is sending any data to malicious server or not. Okay, and employee of the company you can find. So this is how you can perform a firmware analysis from the device. You can basically do it like these. All the aspects should cover when you are performing a firmware analysis. Okay, so till now we have covered introduction to IoT, then setting up the machine for IoT, and firmware analysis, right? So now let's move towards a dynamic testing, that is getting your hands dirty with the testing. Okay, so let's stick to the example of our IP phone, where we are seeing how this IP phone can convert into a bot. So first of all, when I get this IP phone, I was wondering how should I connect with the device. So luckily for this kind of devices, I have a plenty much of there are plenty of options available. So what I did, I just set up a DHCP server on my machine, connected one extra LAN card, and that LAN card was acting as a DHCP server, and that my machine was also a client. But to simplify this, what you can do is you can purchase a very small router, and that router will means with that router, home router, you can connect one end to the laptop and one end to the IP phone. Okay, and once you are able to ping with your IP phone, then the next thing, obviously, what you will do, you will run a Nmap. So always make sure that when you are running a Nmap on any kind of embedded device, or do not believe on top 1000 port. Always run a full port scan with OS detection and all possible parameters. So this was a sample output. So what you can see here is, from this Nmap output, we found a 23 open, port 53 was filtered, port 80 was open, port 443 was open, SSL. So it is showing web server is running with SSL certificate. One new port we found here is 7547. You will not get it in top 1000 port generally. And apart from this, here are some CP information, and here it is showing the OS CP is Linux, and Linux kernel is here, kernel version is given here. Okay, so after running a full-fledged Nmap scan, what we found here, that Telnet is running with default credential. So basically I found a Telnet port open, and simply I connected and logged in with our favorite credential, that is admin, and boom, I got a shell. Here you can see login admin, password admin, and here we get a basic box, direct root shell. So you can understand how secure it is, right? Then the web server was running on port 80 and 443. Then we found one new port, 7547 is open and 53 is filtered. And OS guess what Nmap suggested us is a Linux kernel 2.6 and precisely 2.6.17 to 2.6.36. And if you see here, I ran a uname-a, it is showing 2.6.36. So Nmap is super trustworthy. Like Nmap is our key tool, means everyone's pen tester's key tool. Okay, so if you search, current Linux kernel version is around 5, so it's like double of it. And if you search for the exploits available for this kernel, you will find many exploits like privilege escalation exploit, code execution exploit, remote code execution exploit, or local code execution exploit. So plenty of exploits. So these devices are generally poorly configured and poorly secured. Okay. Now the next thing, obviously we will set up a burp interface in order to verify its web application vulnerabilities. So all these small devices do have a web interface. And you know how this work? This web interface, like this don't have a LAMP stack kind of structure where a web server is different, an application server is different, and then the document root is different and database is different. Sometimes you may find a database in such kind of scenarios, but application logic and application pages are built inside the web server itself. So if you want to study more, you can look for the how Boa web server work or how Go Ahead web server work. So this application logic and the HTML pages generally you will find inside the web server only. So whenever you got the firmware, you should access the web interface. Means to access the web interface of it, you should check this binary, means web binary. Sometimes you may find a Boa web server, sometimes you may find a Go Ahead web server, and sometimes you may sometimes it takes a very long time to identify the names of web server itself. So these names are strange, and sometimes it's like coded in Chinese language. So that is another challenge we generally see. So the application logic is built inside the web server. That's I want to conclude here. Okay, so now we have set up I use our favorite Portsfigure burp suit tool, and here is the request I did, and here is the response. Okay, now what I did, as we have gone through the document, I have accessed this page, entered username, password, and here you can see a request, plain text username and password traversal, admin, and here you get a response. Don't you think something is missing here? They are missing a click jacking option here. So like in most of the scenarios, like click jacking is considered is not even considered as a security issue, but in embedded devices we consider this as a critical issue. So I'll tell you how can attacker utilize this in the final exploit, but make a note of it that there is a no extreme option set. Okay, secondary. So I browse the lot device. I perform many operations on device to identify what are the parameters are there. But what I found here is there is one request called go form set sysadmin. So this request allow you to reconfigure a device. Complete device configuration can be done here. Like you can see user type, admin user, then admin password, then local telnet enable, what is telnet port, telnet remote legal IP. So basically they want to secure the access of telnet with one specific IP, but by default it's 0.0.0.0, and there is no dedicated IP for administrators who take care of this kind of things. Okay, then you can see here radius and everything. Basically you can set up everything in just simple one request. Okay, but don't you think something is missing here? Here you can see a request body, then cookie and the parameters. So there is no unique token like cross-site request forgery. To prevent a cross-site request forgery, there is no nonce is configured here. So basically we can perform a cross-site request forgery attack too. Okay, just make note of it. We have a click jacking, we have cross-site request forgery, and I have reverse engineered the binary of web application, and I found that this diagnostic page like packet trace or ping test, generally these small devices have a diagnostic page to check the connectivity with a web interface, to check the connectivity with the server. Like they cannot always give you a shell access and you can ping from from one desktop to another desktop. This kind of thing doesn't happen. So on your home router, even OpenWRT, you will find a ping page. so that you whether you can ping to the internet or not. So this kind of utility is available. Sometimes also they add so backup functionality so that you can take a backup of configuration and restore the configuration. This also we can abuse. So if you found a backup in a plain text, then what you can do is like you can see some parameters may not be available in the web interface, but you may find those parameters inside the backup file. For example, enabling telnet, disabling telnet, enabling SSH, disabling SSH. This kind of stuff generally you won't find in a web interface. Okay. I have reverse engineered this binary, and I found that the ping command is getting passed to the system without any user sanitization or without any input sanitization. So it was something like it was a system call making ping and IP address. So what I did is I just inserted this double backtick and ID, and here you can see ping to the bad address GID 0. So it resolves the ID command output. That means a command execution. So now we have a clickjacking, we have a CSRF, we have a shell command injection. These three vulnerabilities. We have a UI readdressing, CSRF, shell command injection. Make one fancy page, add your payload there, and just click and see the magic. It's all. So I have created one test POC. Here you can see we have updated the policy of organization. Kindly click on I agree for accepting the terms, and here I clicked on I agree. It makes a background request. So background, it was with clickjacking, it was with default username password, it was logged in and executing the CSRF command and command injection. So here you can see in TMP I have run this command, like for I in 1 to 10 do ID and redirect it to /tmp/test, and here it got executed. So this is how this is how the device security testing is critical. All you need is like to host this POC somewhere else and just share this link to a corporate customers or corporate users, or just bulkly fire it to the any corporate email address. Definitely it's challenging, like definitely there are some minor challenges like finding the IP address, finding the IP phone address, and then sometimes there could be a chances of like no default credential is accessible, or sometimes there could be chances of that we don't have a vulnerability. But if in the sophisticated attack, when we target an organizations or group of organizations, so in that we also do studies like before conducting such kind of attacks. So this is how we can turn a simple IP phone into a botnet. Hope you like the talk. So it's not over yet. Now the next topic is sys internal testing. Now we have performed till now we have covered introduction to IoT, firmware analysis, getting preparing our arsenal, and getting your hands dirty, with which we have created exploit which can remotely exploit millions of IP phones. Okay, now sys internal testing. So some you might be wondering why we are focusing, like we got a shell, right? So we have a command execution vulnerability with ourselves. So now why to test further? Because we have to we are not a hackers, we are a security researchers, so we have to ensure that device cannot be hacked by any ways. So once you got a shell, what should you do? The first thing is a full device compromise. So when I say full device compromise means what? Getting a shell something like a misinterpreter. So you should maintain your access. Sometimes it refers as a maintaining the access. So getting a bind or reverse share of device. How you can get it? By writing a RC script if the Linux is init based. If it's a systemd based, then you have to create one systemd service. Okay. So or you can write a IP tables rule, something like this. In table input you accept and give a telnet D on port this. Or you can write a init D script if it's a init based. And lastly, if device have no prevention for firmware signing mechanism, then you can flash a malicious firmware directly on device. Okay, like you can like backdoor the firmware and reflash it. Okay, now it should be like every time you reboot the device, you should have access with you. Now you got a shell, you got a persistent access. Now what? You have to test for the core vulnerable functionalities. Like you should look for a shadow file, G shadow file, and here are some commands which gives you further insights of the device. So if the Linux is RPM based or DKG based or DPKG based, or if it's an Android, then you can do simply PM list packages and ls system/app. So this is for getting the list of installed software. Then you can check for the core vulnerable software, like we say Java, a complete framework could be a vulnerable if they are using outdated, like we have many Java serial attack with us. Like PHP, many vulnerabilities are there. You can check for the OpenSSL vulnerabilities. Then you can check for the Apache or Light Apache, Light HTTP D or SMBD. So you can see the services which are running on device, and then you can check for the OS level security. Like with uname-a, you can check for the what kernel they are using. Then you can see which are the mods that are available with ls mod. Then like some mods could be could also be a some mods also could be a issue for us. Like some mods might not be as secure as it, or it might contain some vulnerability which you can further exploit. Then you can see the what kind of file system this device supports, so with proc/file system. Then you can see CPU info, so to get a basic information, then memory info, then LSPCI, LSUSB, and then you have to check the operating system security. So how secure the operating system is. So how can you do it? With you can check for the SLinux status. Then you can see a kernel configuration using systemctl-a. Then you can see print environment. Sometimes the environment could be vulnerable also. Like if you are playing CTF, then you might know that how can we abuse a environment variable for exploiting. You can check a LIS, like some command may be you find something interesting. Then cron tab is the most favorite vulnerability which I ever use, which I widely use for exploiting such kind of scenarios. So most of the time, like I used to get a shell using web by reversing web application or some libraries. So I used to get a limited shell access, like admin shell. To escalate privilege, I just simply run okay, it's in coming part. Then you can see a network configuration also. You have to take a dump of network configuration to get a complete insight of picture. If config-a, iw config, iw list, IP address show, brctl show, if in resolve, route-n. Then you can see a network monitoring services which are in use, like SNMP, Nagios, NRP, HTTP. Then you can you should check for your user local custom. This kind of path, this document route, you should verify and collect the complete information. So there could be a way through which you can abuse it, and you can get some other level of access, like other ways. Okay, now the cron is my favorite, because once I get a shell access of device, what I do is like find /-perm permission 777 and -type file and -name star.sh. So it will gives you a list of all shell script which are running with a 777 permission. And some of the shell script you can like first you do a cron tab -l to get a list of the cron tabs, and then you can see if there is a shell script which is getting called. So basically simply you have to add any like user add command to add a user, or some like telnet d. You can start with telnet d-p1337 with that shell script, and whenever you connect back to it, you get a root shell. So for like to perform a permission abuse, this is the best way. Cron job plus bad permission. So permission abuse plus cron job. So this kind of all dumps we will collect in the device at certain stage. Now the challenge comes is like how will you transfer a device from device to the laptop. What happens is like the NC binary is the most useful, like netcat for transferring data from one device to another device. But what problem we see here is like I have tested like hundreds of devices, but what I see majorly here is like they don't configure a netcat with a listener mode. So netcat is present but only one way, like you have to create a listener at your desktop server, but through which you cannot copy the file, right? You must have a listener at device end too. But if you are lucky enough, so you can use netcat for data transfer. Then if you want to download some files from external world, like from your PC to the device, you can use wget. Then the last resort is using BusyBox. So you find the proper architecture, what it is, and get the BusyBox for that and install it. And once I was trying very hard to get data out of it, but I forgot a basic way. So sometimes for Android you should give a try to SD card or ADB push pull command and pen drive. Pen drives for data transfer. And sometimes you may find the FTP get and FTP put, like some proprietary command. So like you have to study each and every command. So what I do here is like ls-ltr pipe grep-v BusyBox. So what it do, it removes all the LSs to BusyBox and it shows you only a proprietary command. So believe me, you will find hardly 10 to 12 command in sbin or bin folder, which are the vendor developed. Okay. Once we have performed this data, you have to get that data out of the device for further analysis. Similar way, we are going to create a core dump. That core dump will be we have to transfer from device to the machine for remote transfer. Okay, now to the last part of the session. Get your Espresso ready. Sometimes cappuccino is not sufficient for fuzzing, reverse engineering and exploit development. Okay, so before we proceed with this section, the first important thing is to obtain the shell. So because now again you might be wondering that if we got a shell, then why we have to do all this stuff again. Like I told you, like these vulnerabilities are super critical. Like all you need is the IP address of the device and boom, you can own that device remotely without any user interaction. So we have to ensure that this device will not get compromised at any cost, even with 0 days or 1 day exploit too. And to ensure that, we have to fuzz each and every aspect of the device. So here in this section we are going to fuzz for HTTP, and we will see how can we own the device with the without user interaction, a complete exploitation. So first step before we proceed is to get the shell. We need a root access over device, or even shell access will be sufficient for the device. So how can we access this? Like there are various ways. First is like exploiting web vulnerabilities. Second is firmware analysis. Third is document review. Fourth is default credential, like we get earlier. So this I have covered, this I have covered. Okay, and this I don't think so. Yeah, this I will show you. And lastly, a reverse engineering binaries. Okay, so in our case, what happened is like I have logged into the index page of the device. Okay, that was something like this /index2.asp, and I found this interesting code. So if request form username equal to tc web API get account entry 1 username. So what I came to know here is that there is something called tc web API which is responsible for the account management. So I was quite sure about logic that something called tc web API who is responsible for the accounting. Okay, so what I did is like I read for the TC Web API and I searched for the SSH and I found a TC Web API binary. Here you see TC Web API set account 0 is commit flag TC Web API custom entry. Okay, request form token, and here you can see input type is hidden, name is SSH flag, value is SSH entry is what. Okay, so I found that there is a way to enable a SSH using TC Web API. So I have enabled the SSH for this device, and after spending countless hours on reverse engineering this TC Web API, I found that the SSH username password, here are some strings like console password, web password, account password, Wi-Fi device, hidden SSID, and these all passwords was stored at the some location called a ROM file. I'm not sure whether I have took it here or not. Okay, so I found that these passwords are stored in a ROM file. So ROM file was a MTD partition, that was read-only partition. So I dumped that partition using mtd info with mtd info and mtd write and mtd dump, and I found that romfile.config, and then I grep for the password. So there I found the details. So SSH entry active, yes, then SSH username is username and SSH password is, here was the password. So I changed that password for demo purpose. Okay, so then I was super excited for logging inside the device, and it was not supporting the default algorithm, so I have to add this Diffie-Hellman group 1 and admin at the SSH and enter the password, and first command is this ps. So you can see here mtd block 0 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. Okay, then config manager, then tc wdog, then here you can see user-fs bin boa. So this boa was the web server. Okay, now what I have to do is like I ran a busybox command. I'm not sure it's how visible it is, but you can see this is a busybox command. When I ran this command, I found there are only these tools. It's very limited, right? So the challenge was, how can I do it? Means how can I get more commands for further analysis? So I found this one command ftp get. So it is saying ftp get option remote host, local file and remote file. So what I did is like I navigated to tmp directory, then did ftp get IP address of my machine, then busybox local name and busybox MIPS, as this was a MIPS architecture. Okay, then I created a bin directory, okay, here, and I installed a busybox with busybox install -s the directory. And now I want to use that busybox as a default busybox, like this as a path variable. So I added the path tmp/bin path. So now my busybox have this many binaries, all commands supported here. So like this is the first step, like getting logging into device and getting what we want. Now we have to enable now we have to make a device fuzzing ready. So when I say what it means by fuzzing ready, we have to enable a core dump, okay, and we have to change the ulimit. So and we have to restart the service which we want to first. So I enable the core dump with echo and core %p pattern, set this to core pattern. Then I set up a ulimit to the highest number. Then I restarted the web server. Now our web server restarted with a core dump enable function. Okay. Now what I did is like what I believe on unauthenticated exploit. Because being a pen tester for almost decade, I know how painful it is to obtain a credential for a black box assessment. So that's why I believe on discovering the exploit which are not dependent on the credential. Basically, I simply capture this request, username password request, take it into a burp suite, okay, and intruder tab, and I selected my fuzz list. So fuzz list is something basically. This is a fuzz list 1, 2A, 5A, 10A, 20A, 50A, 100A, 200A, up to millions and trillions of A. Okay, I loaded this as a payload and I selected all the parameter for fuzzing here and I started the attack. As you can see, after 209 request, it got crashed here. Can you see it? There is no response. But again it is started, right? So ideally if it's crashed, then it shouldn't be start. So what happened? What might have happened at backend? You can see here, caught 6 serve, dumping core in /tmp. Again web server gets started. Again extra read body in write length, read length. Okay, caught 6 serve, dumping core in /tmp. Okay, so now we are pretty much sure that we can crash the web server with a exploit. So now first we have to identify which was the request is responsible for making a crash. So after looking at the log, I found that when I send a 5000A at request number 2010, when I send a 5000A at password field, it is creating a crash. Okay, so device is not responding after sending 5000A. Okay, so now what we have to do? Now we have to enable a debugging. So how can we enable a debugging? So like debugging these devices is like sometimes it becomes a tedious task. I know the professionals who like super professional, what they do is like they take this binary out of device and they fuzz on their own machine with a QEMU environment. But like I love fuzzing on device itself because sometimes there are device dependent dependencies also. So like in this scenario, what was the challenge I was facing on emulating on system is like that device needs a MTD block with that MTD block should be named as a ROM file. for validating credentials. Otherwise this web server won't get started. And QEMU don't have that patch ready with QEMU that I can name the MTD block partition. It will simply start as a MTD block 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so let it be like these are the challenges. So what generally we do here, first we get a GDB server. We get that GDB server on the device. We start the GDB server, attach that binary and connect our GDB architecture with the device. Okay, so what I did, I got a MIPS big ADN GDB server. Okay, and I started a GDB server here and attached the process. Means I attached the process this one and started a GDB server on port 1337. And on client side, like on my machine, I started a GDB multi-arc. You have to use a GDB multi-arc because sometimes we use ARM, sometimes we use MIPS. So in that scenario, and here you can see the current registers of the device. Okay, so this is like we have to enable a remote debugging, and once we enable a remote debugging, we have to reproduce the crash again. So like the easiest way is like 414141 that everyone knows and everyone loves it, like sending AAA. So again, like here you can see I started a Boa web server, attached that process. So you know, remember like when I started this device, the PID was 80 and now we reached to 1363. And here you can see 1380. Okay, so I enable remote debugging for the Boa binary and I send a crash, the 5000 request, and you can see here like in registers. Here you can see how many 4141 we have, like T4 is there, T7 register is there, the inform register S0 to S3 is there, and a return address. All set. We have 4 registers where we can store a shell code and we can call it also. Okay, so now what we have to do, MSF pattern create and MSF pattern create of length 5000 and reproduce the crash. Okay, so again like attach the process, did everything same and fired the request. You can see here these are the offsets. So here you can see different values, like once you got this pattern, like you have to match this with the offset. So here I did it. I took all the values and I found that it started matching from 1000. First crash, like first register which is in control is 1000, then 1004. So this could be a T4 and T7. Then we have a 28, 32, 36, 40. This should be S0 to S4. Okay, and like this should be a return address 1044. Okay, so these all patterns are matched. And boom, I own the device. So generally when when this is a live session, I ask everyone to decode what is it. You can answer it on Discord, what is it, before I tell you in the next slide. Can you see here same numbers, 5434, 5434, 4237, 5437. Okay, 3053, 3053, 3153, 3153, 3253, 3253, and 3353 and 3353. And the PC is not controlled here. Okay, what it is? It is T4, T7, S0, S1, S1, S2, S3, S3. Okay, here is a exploit. So what I did is like I import a socket and structs from Python. I created a buffer with this request. Username was buffer overflow, buff0, log off, and these are the routine parameter. And in password field, I write 8,999 times. Since you remember, like first we obtain a access at 1000 register. Okay, so 999 I have given padding. Then T4 was the first register where I wrote. Second was the T7, then B9 there is a padding, and here we see T6 was in also control. Then again the padding between S0 and then 8-bit padding, and then S0, S1, and again a buffer, and I send this exploit and you own the device. So this kind of exploit doesn't even need user interaction. All you need is the IP address. You fire this and you own the device. Like all you have to do is like you have to store your shellcode in this 4 register and you have to access this register, and it's RC. unauthenticated remote code execution. Now imagine if you got access to any organization, if you are firing this, like you can control millions of phones. Or sometimes I doubt even like through some endpoint you can reach to the inside network of the organization. All you need to reach the network of the organization, and that's it. So I'm answering already questions here, but yeah. Thank you Texas, thank you Grey Hat, thank you Joseph. Thank you everyone for being with me. Hope you enjoyed the talk.